Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I was going to start off and just ask, there's a variety of age here, but so for the adults, I know, one of the questions I thought was, have you ever been to New York in the past? So how many people have been to New York at all? Okay. Has anybody been there after the attacks? Okay, so actually more, seems like probably a lot of you guys have made it there after, so that's great. What I thought I'd do today is, so I traveled to New York on September 9th, 2001 for a training session for my work. I was working in Kansas City for Morgan Stanley, a financial advisory firm, and they had about 30 floors of office space in the second tower of the World Trade Center. So I was off for what I thought was going to be a great fun experience of spending 3 weeks in New York, going to a sales training class, and so obviously it changed when that time came on September 11th. So what I thought I'd do today is just start off and tell you a couple of things. I want to first off just kind of talk a little bit about what the World Trade Center buildings were, just to kind of give you a little bit of perspective on the size. We had a chance to go there with my wife in 2007 to go there, and she had not been there before, and it was one of those things for me. It was difficult to really point out the size of the buildings and to kind of get a grasp for kind of just the magnitude of what had happened. So this is, go back one here. This is what the skyline of New York looked like on basically the morning of September 11th. But those two towers, construction started on them in 1966, and then cost about $1.5 billion in money then. So imagine how expensive that would have been today. But in 1972, the first one was completed, and in 1973, the second was completed. So they were 1,300 feet tall and 110 stories, which made them the tallest and largest buildings in the world until the Sears Tower actually passed it a year later. So each of those 110 stories made up an acre in size and added up to 12 million square feet of office space. There were about 430 companies in there with about 50,000 employees on a daily basis. So if you think about that, that's actually pretty much the city of Salina in these two buildings for work every day. And then in addition to that, about 140,000 visitors visited every day just to go through the buildings, make it to the top, and really look out, the kind of the observatory and things at the top. I thought it was interesting. I found a set on windy days, the towers actually swayed back and forth 12 inches. So it tells you they were up there pretty high. So there were 198 elevators, so 15 miles worth of elevator shafts that made up the elevator space in there. Enough concrete to build a sidewalk from New York to Washington, D.C. And then also 43,600 windows. Said it took 2 months continuous to clean the windows of one of the buildings. So I'm assuming that was somebody's full-time job to clean those things and to start over at the end of the 2 months. So it took 10 mail carriers to deliver all the mail every day through the buildings. And then on average, there was an observation deck on the top floor of the second tower, and on average, about 1.8 million people visited that floor, or that building every year. And then from December of 1975 until when that visitor observatory area opened, until the evening of September 10th, 2001, 46,350,000 people went through it just to go up and look out the window. So. And then most of you probably know in 2001, those terror attacks weren't the first time that the buildings had any kind of terrorist event. There were, in 1993, they drove a truck loaded with a bomb into the building. So at 12:18 p.m., about 6 people were killed and 1,000 were injured in 1993 at that event. So. Anyway, I know those are a lot of numbers, but I just thought it made sense to kind of think about really how big that is. I'm like you, I'm from a small town, and that was pretty. I always thought it was pretty amazing that you could think about putting 50,000 people in a building, in a couple of buildings for work. So that takes us to the morning of September 11th, 2001. It was a beautiful morning. It was sunny. The sky was bright, no clouds in the sky. And I was in a meeting that started at 7:30 a.m. It was on the 61st floor of the second tower, or the south tower. You hear both referenced in here. Day started off just like the previous day's meeting. We had a speaker at 8:41 a.m. I specifically remember the time because I remember our instructor of the meeting saying you have 19 minutes for a break versus 15 minutes. So you got 19 minutes. Be back in here at 9 o'clock for our next meeting to start, for our next speaker to begin. So we came out, went into kind of a lobby area, maybe similar to right outside the auditorium here, and grabbed a coffee, stood around with some other colleagues just looking out the window, amazed at the view from, so here I am from Minneapolis, Kansas, 61 flights up on the tower of this building looking down at the Statue of Liberty. So I thought this was pretty cool. We stood here for just a couple minutes having a conversation, kind of really just trying to figure out what night we're going to the Yankees game, what night we're doing all these fun things for our trip to New York. So at 8:46 a.m., we heard an explosion. So again, just standing there looking out the window, heard an explosion, didn't really know what it was, but immediately started seeing debris falling down the windows in front of us. So at the height we were, you were looking down at the top of other buildings, watching pieces of paper, kind of similar to if you watch like a Super Bowl parade or something, and there's the ticker tape type parade where there's just confetti and papers and everything blowing in the air. That's kind of what it looked like, just watching papers just float down and land on the building next to you. So didn't know, just kind of stood there and watched, didn't really know what to do. Thought, well, was there a fire or an explosion upstairs? Don't really know what happened. Nothing set in, nothing serious, no nerves or anything like that set in, just weren't really sure. So in the next couple of minutes, our facilitator for the meeting came in, said, go back to your desk, there's been an accident at the first tower, the north tower, and we are going to just gather up, we're checking with security for direction on what maybe next steps should be. So they came in and they said, hey, as a precaution, we're going to go ahead and evacuate the building. So go ahead and head to the stairs and start your walk down to the ground floor. Now, I grabbed my bag and everything and said, if I'm going down, my initial thought was, walking down 61 flights of stairs, that's probably it for the day. And we'll figure out what we do after that. So I grabbed my bag, ran into one of my colleagues that was also from my office in Kansas City, and we said, hey, let's stick together and walk out. So on the way towards the stairwell, I overheard a security guard say that an airplane had hit the building. Still at that point, didn't know. They kind of commented that they thought maybe it was a large plane, but didn't know anything in depth. So obviously later, that flight was identified as the American Airlines Flight 11, and it crashed into the north tower between floors 93 and 99. So it was pretty high towards the top. There were 110 stories, so it really basically went in from 93 through 99. So as we entered the stairwell, it felt really slow. When I look back at the times, it probably wasn't as slow as it felt like, but if you can imagine when you're walking into a stairwell, there's 60 flights of people below you filling it. So we'd take a few steps and then stop, and then take a few steps again and stop, and that just kind of continued as we moved down. So by the time we made at 8:55 a.m., we had made it to the 47th floor. At that time, an announcement came over the intercom in the building and said, the building is secure, there's no need to, building 2 is secure, there's no need to evacuate, you should return to your desk to work. So we exited the stairwell and came out. When we came out, there was a bank of elevators right there for people to get on, and a lot of people were getting on. Thankfully, we were slow to act and just kind of stood around and said we didn't really know what to do. So we looked over, and on the other side was an office, and it was a casualty insurance office. And there were some guys standing there looking out the window. So the 2 of us in our group said, let's go in there and see if we can look out their window. So we went in and asked them, can we just look and see what's going on? So we did. We went in there and we were able to stand looking out the north side of the building at the first tower on fire. So And what you can see here, this slide, it's hard to see from back there, but what's highlighted is, and I found interesting when I was, after the fact when I got back, is on the left-hand side is kind of my itemized phone bill from the time. So what I did at 9:01 a.m. was I said I need to call my parents and let them know I'm okay and find out what's going on. Still at this point, we have no idea besides there's a fire at the building next to us. So I called, got a hold of my mom on the phone. We had just been the weekend before that together, and they knew I was at the World Trade Center, but I thought they have no idea, which building I'm in or anything like that. So I let them know that I was okay. And one thing you have to remember is this was 15 years ago. So one is I actually had to walk back into my hotel room that morning, made a conscious effort to go back and get my phone and put it in my pocket, because you didn't walk around with your phone in your pocket every day like now. So I obviously was thankful for that after the fact. I can remember standing there about ready to walk out for our meetings that morning and thinking, I guess I'll go grab my phone. I'm not sure why, but I'll grab it so I have it in my pocket. So during that call to my mom, and that's what this kind of outlines is, the top one I have highlighted is, it was a 2-minute phone call. So during that phone call with her at 9:03 a.m., the building shook and there was a loud noise. We heard a loud boom, building shook, and again, didn't really know what was going on, but obviously that's kind of when part of it started to set in. So I hung up the phone, said I'll call you back, which was by far, if I still say today, it was by far my biggest thing I wish I could take back. Sorry. Because I felt like that was one of those cases, it's so hard to explain, but when you know you're okay and nobody else knows you're okay, that's a hard spot to be in. So that noise and that building shaking turned out to be Flight 175, United Airlines Flight 175, and it hit it crashed into the south side of the building. We were in the south tower. It hit between floors 77 and 85. So if you think back where we started on the 61st floor, it was about 16 floors above that and came in the same side of the building we were looking at originally, and about 30 floors above where we were at currently. That time, so when we hung up the phone, I ran into a couple of other colleagues that I'd been in a breakout session with earlier, and the day before. And so now at this point now there were 4 of us. So another guy that I was with, and then a girl from New York and a girl from Florida, that we said, hey, let's all walk together. So we went back into the stairs. We were able to walk at a normal pace, basically no stopping. And except for the fact that while we were walking, one of the girls had on heels because we were at a business meeting, and she had on heels and she fell a full flight of stairs. So we thought we were gonna have to carry her. We stopped and helped her get up and said, do you need us to carry you or can you make it? And she said, no, I can make it. So she pulled her shoes off and basically went barefoot the rest of the way until after we got out of the building, when we were walking, and it was just crazy. We got about 2 blocks away, there was a foot locker, so she stopped and bought running shoes so that we had shoes to walk the rest of the way. So overall, at that point, like I said, the evacuation was pretty orderly. A couple different spots you'd see where someone had either dropped a coffee or a water or something, and so people pretty much were just, as they were walking, they were just kind of talking and keeping everybody calm, saying, hey, there's water ahead, or watch the floor ahead, things like that. So very fortunate in that, like I said, our walkway was very orderly. I had friends who went out a different side of the building, one of the many stairwells, and they said it was not the same. They had people who were screaming or people yelling at each other because they just weren't sure. Everybody just in panic. So as we reached about the last 10 floors, we started seeing firemen going up in their full gear, carrying hoses, and obviously, unfortunately, probably most of those people didn't make it out. They were going in and going up as all of us were trying to get out. So when I stepped out of the building, my first thought was, one, look up and see, pause and see what's going on. But the other was to try to call my family back. So I immediately pick up my phone, start looking up, and I can actually remember, I can almost see the police officer's face yelling at me to get off my phone and get away from the building. So at that point, we just said, you know, this is my second day in New York in my life. All I really want to do is get away from the buildings, and what do we do but go back to our hotel. So our hotel was about 3.5 miles north of the Trade Center. So our group just decided to start walking that direction. It was really it's kind of hard to describe the feeling. It was a surreal feeling, like kind of like being in a movie. Is what I felt like, or watching kind of an action movie. Is when we came out, all you see is people in FBI jackets or NYPD jackets, U.S. Marshals, all these kind of people running towards the building, and you're going away from it. So those aren't things that you see that's what kind of started to make it set in that, hey, there is something big going on here, and I don't really know quite what it is. But as we were walking, we heard a radio broadcast coming out of a car parked alongside the street. Someone had turned their radio up. And that's when it really set in that we knew this was a really big deal. While we were walking, I heard it in that, that stereotypical, just that radio announcer broadcaster voice saying that the World Trade Center has been hit, the Pentagon has been hit, and the United States of America is under attack. And that just sent chills down. I mean, at the time, even it was like, okay, this is a really big deal. This is way more than just some kind of an accident. So as we continued, so again said, hey, let's keep going, start walking towards the hotel and get away. So as we continued, we kept trying to call family. The phone systems were just so jammed up that you couldn't get anything to go through. So I basically walked with my phone in one hand, hitting, talk and just over and over, and trying to see if something would go through. At 9, this one here. So at 9:59 a.m., the South Tower actually collapsed. So that was 56 minutes after the impact. And 4 minutes later, at 10:03, I was able to finally get my phone to go through. I was we were walking, and I just noticed that it went through. A call went through, and I was able to say that I was okay. And still didn't know if my family had heard it, but I knew that again, you could tell someone was on the other end of the line, but you couldn't hear them. So I was able to say I was okay. So as we continued to walk, and everyone kept continuing to call, we kind of hit an open parking lot. And as silly as it sounds, I guess you were just looking for something, but somebody's phone worked. And so we were in this kind of open parking lot in the middle of the city, and everybody stopped and said, let's stand in the same spot and see if we have reception right here and our phone's going to go through. It didn't, but we, at the same time, we heard a bunch of commotion ahead of us on the street. So took off, ran up to that next street, and turned and looked back, and you could just see the horror on people's face. And we turned around and looked back, and it was 10:28 a.m., and that's when the North Tower collapsed. So instead of looking down the street and seeing two big buildings, we looked back to just see basically dust and debris in there. So soon after that, we got to a furniture store. And at that point, we were able to, we knocked on the door. They had closed, obviously, and so knocked on the door and asked if we could come in and use their phone. So we could use their landline phone. First they said no, but then they let us in, and there was just a bank of phones there for us to use. So we all sat down and just started dialing. It still probably took 10 to 15 times of making a phone call before anything went through. So we actually said, everybody, while we were dialing, said, if you get a call to go through, don't hang it up. And so we were able to get through, talk to family. Then I actually had my mom call two other people that, the person from Florida and the person from New York, and just said, here's their phone number, just call and tell them they're okay. And then we'll eventually get a hold of them. So that kind of was, obviously was a relief. In all honesty, at that point, it completely changed kind of my perception on the day, because I had finally told everybody I was okay. I knew I was okay. We were away from everything, so a lot of the panic, at least in my mind, went away, and we kind of relaxed a little bit. And from that point on, we kind of eventually made it back to our hotel. The director of our meetings was asking us to go up to the front desk, sign in, so that everyone could be accounted for. And then we would, later on in the evening, we had a meeting where they read off the people's names that had not checked back into the hotel yet. and just asked, has anyone seen these people? And so they, it was obviously sad meeting, but thankfully, over time, as we did that 2 or 3 times, over time, everyone was accounted for. There were a couple of people with some minor injuries, but actually everyone in our group got out. And I know there's a special I've seen on TV too, that talks about Morgan Stanley, the company I work for, and how their security guard had actually really prepped for these kind of events and was killed there, but was adamant that he was getting everyone out. And so that's part of why I think we started the evacuation process immediately versus some people who maybe took a little bit longer. The remainder of the day was pretty much made up of returning phone calls. It was a nice feeling. Every time I made a call to someone, as soon as I got off, I had 3 or 4 more voicemails on my phone, and so just pretty much spent my whole time just calling people back. A lot of people I hadn't heard from for years, from being in college or anything like that. So, but basically, we were stranded in our hotel. We kind of been advised to find some food. There's nothing you can do. The city is shut down. The streets were full of people because the subway systems had shut down. So everyone had just come out out from underground, basically, in New York, and just standing in the middle of the street. So our hotel had advised us to go get food because this place everything's going to run out pretty quickly. So it was kind of a strange feeling of going from the big city of New York, of multiple lanes of traffic and cabs and everything else, to people standing there, and then that night, nothing going on. There were just a couple of police cars would go by every now and then, or an ambulance would go by. Other than that, it was just pitch black out your windows. So before I go on, kind of say a couple more things. I have some pictures that I thought were interesting. So in our training, one of the guys was in our training. So I told you that we had a break at 8:41. He said, "I'm going outside for the break. I'm not staying in the building." So he took the elevators down, which actually took him they had express elevators, so you had to take an elevator down, get off, get on another elevator, and go down, just to make your way out of the building. But he went outside and happened to be standing on the ground outside when everything happened. So these pictures, these about 3 slides, I put them on, are pictures that he took. He turned around and bought, as soon as he heard the first explosion and looked up and saw the fire, he turned around and bought a disposable camera from a street vendor. So you can see the first one on the left is the fire up there, and he's pretty close by. So this tower here is the one we were in. We were on the at that point probably on the 47th floor, on our way to the 47th floor. So about halfway up in the building. The one on the left, you can see he's still getting a little further away, but the one on the right, he took a picture pretty much right at impact of the plane hitting the building. So you can see the explosion that happened there. And then you can see he, was obviously supposed to get away from the building, so he's getting a little bit further away, but you can see kind of how high up the fire was on each building. You can see on the one on the right is the north tower. The first one hit, so you can see it's quite a ways up there. The second one hit was a little bit lower. So the next morning on September 12th, we said, well, what do we do now? Our training's over. We don't know, our travel is tough. We said we have to find a way to get home. So the first thing we did is try to book a flight. I personally said it's 2.5 hours. We get on a flight, we're home in 2.5 hours. That's probably the safest day in history to fly, because everybody's going to be watching. So I wanted to get on a plane. Other people said I've never, had more of the impact that I'll never get on a plane again. But we spent that day. We canceled. We scheduled a flight. It got canceled. We scheduled another flight. It got canceled. And so eventually, we just came to the realization that if we really want to get home, flying is not going to work. So we went across the street from our hotel to Penn Station, the train station, and said, I want a train as far west as we can go without stopping. And they said, well, that's Philadelphia, which will take you like 45 minutes on the train. So that's not very far. So, but we were able, that was far enough, did it for us. We were able to take a train there, and we knew we were able to get a rental car in Philadelphia, where they were all out in the New York area. So now we had our plans, knew how we were going to get home. So I thought all we could do now is really wait for that 6 a.m. train the next morning to get us out of the city. So just around the corner from us was a fire station, and they had lost a lot of firemen in the collapse. So a couple of us said, before we take off in the morning, let's walk over there and talk to those guys. So we started to do that. We actually never quite made it, because when we got right about to the fire station, a police car came down the street with its siren going and over the intercom saying, you need to get off the streets. Everybody should be inside, get off the streets. And at that time, I assumed that it was, they didn't want people looting. They just were trying to clear the streets off. But what in fact it was, when we got back into our hotel, the U.S. Marshals had moved in and were staying in our hotel. We get back there and they were going out, and we come to find out that there was a suspicious package or a bomb threat at the Empire State Building, which was 2 blocks or 3 blocks from our hotel. So at that point, we had to evacuate and move back, and we actually ended up actually right where it was barricaded off from Ground Zero or the towers again. So we had to walk that far. So when I looked at my phone bill, it was 11:35 p.m. When I called home again and said, "This time we really are out. We're safe and don't know what's going on, but that we're leaving in just a little bit." So at 4 a.m., even though the train station was across the street, and we arrived at least 2 hours before our train was going to leave, because that wasn't one any of us wanted to miss. So we left our hotel at 4 a.m. on September 13th. Got into Kansas City. We took the train to Philadelphia, got a rental car, drove straight to Kansas City, and got to my house at 3 a.m. Central Time. So pretty much a 24-hour straight shot back to Kansas City. So that kind of tells you a little bit about how my day and that trip part went. But I wanted to also just take a couple minutes. I told you before, I've been back to New York in 2007, but actually just a couple weeks ago I had a chance to go back again. And so the first time we were there, 6 years after, or almost 6 years after the attacks had happened, and basically the city was still in cleanup mode. You couldn't, it looked like a huge construction site. You couldn't really grasp what had happened. We were walking around, listening to one of the speakers talking, and he was telling about how there were rumors that they told you not to evacuate the building, which I nudged my wife and said, "I know that there's not a rumor. I heard it. They told us not to evacuate the building." And now that's actually documented. I don't know where it came through, but we did find that the exact time that they announced that the building was secure, you didn't need to evacuate it. But so it was really interesting. We had the chance to spend basically a day or a day and a half around kind of the memorial area, and it was really neat to see. One, they've done a really great job, I thought, of honoring kind of all the victims, but also how respectful all the visitors are to it. It is that's a big, loud, busy city, and when you step into that area where the site was, it is just completely quiet. People pretty much whispering to each other. It was really neat. I thought how they really kind of a somber, quiet place. So there were basically 3 areas we were able to visit. The first was the reflecting pools, and these two holes, these fountains, are the largest. I think they're the largest man-made waterfalls in North America. But what they did is that's the actual location and area of the the two towers. So the one on the left will be the North Tower, and the one on the upper right is the South Tower. So that's where the 2 towers set. So they actually just left those there, put in basically a park and trees. In the middle, the piece you can kind of see sticking out, the building you see sticking out in the middle, is actually the museum. So they built this nice, again, quiet area. Around those reflective pools are names of all the victims that died in the World Trade Center on September 11th, and also the 6 people that died there during the bombing in 1993. So you can see where everyone's names are etched in there. So that was really neat. And then another one. That I thought I had one in there that has a flower. There's so another thing that they do is the 9/11 volunteers, or the memorial volunteers, actually take roses, and on anyone's birthday, any of the victims' birthday, they put a rose in their name. So when we walked around the other day, there were maybe 10 different places that had a rose stuck in that name that's etched in there. And the family members know, there's a little code kind of on the bottom of the panels where you can see, so family members know right where they find their their name and everything. So the other place we went was the museum. It was well worth the visit. I personally am not a museum person, but it was amazing. We spent probably 3 to 3.5 hours there, and we probably could have spent 2 days in there. It has everything from like this fire truck that was crushed when the buildings collapsed, to steel beams that were either melted or twisted. In there, there's a multimedia room that actually plays a lot of the like news broadcasts. Like for example, we found one. I always think these are interesting, but we found one that was the Today Show that was live, and just seeing the look on the Matt Lauer's face when he was interviewing. He's in an interview with someone, and and then just stops, and you can just see the look on his face of someone who lives in New York, and who just says, we have breaking news from the World Trade Center, we're going to break, and just completely just cuts off his interview, and then they come back. So they have a lot of those kind of things that they've set up, so you can really walk around and see. There's also a hall or a couple of rooms that have pictures of each of the victims. These shoes are one. There was a story of a lady who had walked, I don't remember the distance now, she had walked to get to her house, and said she donated her shoes to the museum for, you could just see that she had worn blisters in her feet enough to bleed through her shoes. But in these victims, it was interesting because within the last couple of years, I've met a guy that I work with whose brother was worked in the restaurant and tourism business, and he was up on the top floors of the second tower. So he was up at the observatory and where there was a restaurant and those kind of things, and he was working up there, so he was above the impact and never made it out. Well, I talked to the guy. He said they went and they spent I think 3 weeks in New York waiting to see if they ever found him and if he was ever if he had made it out. But after the fact, they go back every year to all the memorials. I'm sure they were there yesterday. But what's interesting about it is there's also a bank, like kind of a computer sitting there, and you can walk up, and you can find a name. You can search by a name, or you can find their picture, and if you touch it, it pulls up the person's picture and some pictures of their family and tells you all about their life. So the families of the victims have really put a lot of work into that too. So we were able to pull it up, kind of heard the brief story about him, saw the picture of the guy I know, what him and his other brothers in the picture. So it's kind of a neat thing to see. And then the last one, these are just cool pictures we took when we were there. But this is what's called the Freedom Tower, or One World Trade Center now. They rebuilt it. It's 104 stories tall, so it's built out to the side of where the original two were, because they built a memorial there. But it's 104 stories tall. It's the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere. It's the 6th tallest in the world. It took about 8.5 years to build it. So it just opened in November 2014. And then on the 100th, 101st, 102nd floors of it, there's an observatory. They call it the One World Observatory. And it has a restaurant, a gift shop, just a really amazing view of the city. When you come out of the elevator, when you go up there, it's blank. They have you kind of staring at a picture, and you're kind of like, it's kind of odd. I paid to come up here, and am I gonna get to look out one window, or what's gonna happen? And they run a story, and then they just pull the shades up, and you can just see for as far as you can imagine. So it's very neat to see. When we first got there, I said there's no way. When we were down on the ground it was a Friday, we were looking around and going through the museum and everything, and I said, no way I'm going up there. But then the next day, decided we'd try it, and the whole time I was up there, I wasn't scared, but I definitely was nervous, or not comfortable, kind of thinking, was this a bright idea or not? But it was really neat to be able to see, just kind of like, these are some of the pictures we took, just the view from out there. So that's looking north towards all of New York City, and clear up there you can see a little bit of Central Park, but the Statue of Liberty. So it was really a great view of the city. It was neat to go up there. So I'd recommend it if you go. But But with that, I'll wrap it up, and thanks for having me come in. I'm happy to, if anybody might answer questions, if you have time for that, or whatever. Do anything.